Hi everyone, welcome back. We're about to start the second session of the second panel of this session. So this one is titled On the Ground and at 30,000 feet, the impact of powering agriculture. I'm just going to start with the housekeeping elements once again and then go straight to the panel. So once again, I'm Augusta Abrahams. I am the program manager for Powering Agriculture. And I will facilitate this session, but I hope to leave plenty of time for audience questions. So some quick notes, this session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Water and Energy for Food website and YouTube channel. Please write your questions and comments in the Q&A box on the right-hand side. You have the option of submitting your questions anonymously, but if you include your name, that would also be great because then we can know who we're talking with. You may like other people's questions to increase the likelihood of my asking them to the panel. You can also turn on live captions in English or automatic translations in German, Arabic, French, or Spanish by clicking the closed caption button below. So with that, let's just jump right in and I will leave it to each of the panelists to introduce themselves. So with us, we have Keith Crane, who was one of the evaluators for Powering Agriculture, Jiten Galani and Helen, who are two of highly successful innovators, and Lisa from Alpha Mundi, who's a participant in the Powering Agriculture Investment Alliance. With that, let's go ahead and start with Keith. Then we'll go Keith, Helen, Jiten, and Lisa.
Hi, I'm an economist, and you've just listened to me for parts of the last hour. So I think without further ado, I will turn it over to the rest. But I have a lifelong interest in development. I've worked on development on a number of different projects.
Hi everyone, I'm Helen and I'm from Future Pump. Future Pump is a manufacturer of solar powered irrigation pumps for smallholders in the tropics, and we've been supported by Powering Agriculture since 2015. So we're coming to the end of our award now.
Hi, I'm Jiten Galani from Promethean Power Systems. Promethean designs and manufactures refrigeration systems with thermal batteries for agricultural refrigeration in off-grid and partially electrified areas of developing countries such as India. We've been with Powering Agriculture since 2013-2014, and we've participated in several activities post the award.
And I'm Lisa Willems. I'm with Alpha Mundi and part of the Powering Agriculture Investment Alliance. And Alpha Mundi is a hybrid organization. So we have a for-profit impact advisor headquartered in Switzerland that invests in East Africa and Latin America through 2 different impact funds that we manage. And then there's Alpha Mundi Foundation, which is a nonprofit, and the group that participated in this alliance, and the nonprofit supports small and medium-sized enterprises with technical assistance. So for this, it was Powering Agriculture. So we supported 24 Powering Agriculture SMEs over the last 2 years, and we have 1 year left to go in the program.
Thanks, guys. So my first question, since you guys have all been participating for a while with Powering Agriculture, and both Future Pump and Promethean have been very successful innovators under our program, is I'm hoping you can tell us more about your experience with Powering Agriculture and how it's made a difference and an impact to your organization. And then in the case of Lisa, where Alpha Mundi is getting some support from Powering Agriculture to find and invest in energy and ag nexus companies, how has this been catalytic to both Alpha Mundi and the companies that you guys support? So let's go ahead and start with Helen.
Yeah, so as I just said, we've been supported by Powering Agriculture for 5 years now. And the first thing I'll say is that without the support of Powering Agriculture, we would not be anywhere near the scale we are at today. The grant funding actually allowed us to experiment and test new business models and new technology in new markets. So this is certainly not something that a lot of startups are free to do with the grant funding experiment and test. And the grant gave us the opportunity to take ideas off paper and out of the lab and into the field and learn by doing, which is something that Future Pump is a fundamental philosophy in our company. So yeah, basically with this grant funding, we've been able to get out into the field and scale and get our innovation, the solar water pump, to thousands of smallholder farmers.
Promethean has been a sort of participant since 2013, 2014, and this Powering Ag program has been absolutely instrumental to our success. Initially, we had several challenges on the ground with our solar powered and thermal battery based milk chillers and refrigeration systems. And what the program really helped us do is, refine our technology from the initial prototypes and improve on our design, but also really learn what the operational challenges are on the ground. And this program really helped us demonstrate to an initial set of customers that turned out to be our anchor customers, and helped us grow from less than 100 milk chillers installed in India to over 1,500 chillers operating today in India, and an expansion to Bangladesh, East Africa, and other markets. It really helped us prove the technology and gain the initial market, which was really important as it sort of provides the initial use case for other customers and other markets to follow. Since then, we've sort of launched multiple products and variants, which would not have been possible, and we wouldn't have been able to reach this scale without the program. And most recently, we've raised equity funding and debt to support our new products, and also our launch of cooling as a service to help reach more farmers and villages with our technology.
Great, I guess it's my turn. So Powering Ag has been super catalytic, I think, both for all of the companies that we've worked with, as well as for us as an investor. So as I mentioned, we've done 24 projects, many are actually still ongoing, but we have already catalyzed in about $14 million of private sector funding, a lot of which has come from Alpha Mundi investment vehicles. And at the fund level, how Powering Ag has been really helpful is that as investors, we often have companies approach us for funding, and we're able to, they're just not quite ready to absorb the capacity of our institutional funding. But with Powering Ag, we've been able to provide them with like super targeted and catalytic technical assistance that helps them get to that, next stage or next phase of their development, where then we can come in with a private investment, either us or someone else. So I think the value that we've sort of brought is bringing this link between the investor mindset and the technical assistance that the company needs to scale. And I think have about 7 companies in our portfolio that have received Powering Agriculture funding, most of them at the pre-investment level. That's helped catalyze in money, and then a lot of the rest of the companies, we still have projects ongoing with them, and some have catalyzed in money from other companies as well. So I think it's been hugely catalytic, and we're hoping to continue doing more of this in the future. I know this part of the program is coming to an end, but for us, I feel like we're just getting started.
Thanks, Lisa. So now I want to get to this burning question that came up in the last panel, and we've had a lot of questions from the audience already on this. So as was noted by STPI, there seems to be this tension between market-based technological solutions and our donors' desire, but really everyone's desire for social impacts like reducing poverty and gender inequality. And in this context, we talked about how it was really hard to market these technologies to the very poorest of the poor and the price points for these technologies. And so I'm just wondering so let's start again with Helen and Jiten, how you guys are thinking about that and working to overcome it, and if you have ideas about what donors can do to support that. And then Lisa, following up with you as well, what do you see the role of programs like this and impactors and investors in tackling this problem?
Yeah, so there is always this tension, and we'd be lying if we said that we didn't feel the tension between the business side and the designing and creating a new technology, testing new business models, and also the impact metrics and trying to meet certain goals. And certainly at the beginning of the program, we didn't really know which goals we were setting for ourselves. We were trying to set targets for impact and social and environmental change, and then we're trying to meet them through developing a business as well. And that was extremely hard sometimes to manage how that they were both developing through the years. So it's a big challenge to be able to sell a new technology such as a solar water pump, brand new technology in a new market. It's early adopters, and it's trying to reach people who are willing to accept a new technology, but also trying to meet the underserved and get this technology to the poorer communities. It's very difficult. And usually when you're trying to prove an early business, you want to show that you've got a secure revenue, and that sometimes clashes with trying to also reach this underserved market. So this is where actually grant funding is extremely helpful in making it possible to be able to experiment in reaching underserved markets whilst also developing the business. But it does result in sometimes this challenge between the two. And we sort of thought about overcoming this through the business. It largely has to be a constant communication within the business about what metrics we are actually trying to reach, and why we're going into the industry we're going into. So I don't think any of us have gone into the development side of the industry to make massive returns on our investments. We want to have a positive social impact, and it's important that that is always communicated, as well as the business statistics and how well we're doing in that side. And we work to try and improve our products, to make them more user friendly, to make them cheaper, to distribute them cheaper. And this is how we're trying to ultimately create a business which can meet all of the sides. But at the early stage of just trying to make that initial business, it can be extremely difficult to meet all the different key performance indicators which are pulling you in several different directions.
Helen, before I go on to Jiten, because Jiten, I'm hoping you can address this too. I know that a big portion of your award was, trying to look for a financing model that worked for, that helped to make it more affordable. Is there anything else you can say about how that's gone and how that's working?
Yeah, so we actually produced a document for Powering Agriculture, which I'm sure we can link to somewhere in the chat, perhaps, about the sort of challenges that we went through trying to find a way of financing solar pumps to make them cheaper. So we worked with banks, we've worked with SACCOs and small groups, microfinance institutions. We've worked with our distribution network, who also have their own in-house finance plans, and we're yet to hit on one that is extremely it's scalable. There's a lot of mistrust of banks in a lot of the markets we're working at, and high interest rates and things are really detrimental to it. And also, again, on a brand new technology, it's not a collateral that people really fully understand and then want to invest on. It's not like buying a house and getting a loan on that. It's not as understood. So we've found that extremely difficult and tried every single way we can possible but now we are trying to work on getting the product to the customers as cheaply as possible before having to have finance, and see if we could hit a price point where the price of the product doesn't require the financing, which is a challenge in itself.
Thanks. Go ahead, Jiten.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, Helen, I think touched on some very important points that are actually quite similar, and I can sort of just comment on how they've played out for Promethean. You know, it also affects sort of what stage of the company you're at, and initially you're trying to prove the technology and demonstrate that it has a sort of initial use case that's reliable. Then you have to prove that there's consistent usage, and then if you want to add on the financing options to actually make them more affordable and accessible, you need to build out a long track record to demonstrate to lenders. All of this takes time and is quite challenging. And these are all sort of critical steps for building a successful business. At the same time, on the impact side, I think maybe we need to show some of the same, I don't know if patience is the right word, but it does take time. I mean, some of the impact is longer term and will be seen over a period of time where the initial impact may be more reliable income for the farmer or the or a more stable and assured opportunity for the farmers in the group, in our case, to produce more agricultural, either dairy products or other products, and these things take some time. So what we look at is how can we bring more reliable refrigeration to the doorstep of farmers. And initially, our anchor customers, which are dairy companies, were a great sort of partner for us, and they were the ones that were our buyers and customers, and they brought the refrigeration to the farmers. Over time, as we've demonstrated those initial models and reached 1,500 villages, 50,000, 60,000 farmers using the technology every day, we know that the potential and opportunity is much greater. And so since then initial validation and acceptance, we have been developing variants of our technology, smaller capacity, cheaper and easier to use, coupled with financing options. But all of that sort of is possible after the initial sort of acceptance, and I think we've been able to sort of reach that stage. But so just to summarize, I mean, on the impact side, also some of these impact metrics maybe need to be measured over a longer period of time, and some more, and then I think some more technical assistance or demonstration grants that are specifically targeted for the underserved or the specific groups that we would like to address. For, in our case, either we're working with the women's farmers group to help connect them to market. I mean, there are many opportunities, but there has to be the partners both on the ground, but also in terms of financial support, who are willing and able to take some time to help demonstrate these new models. And so I think, we've seen some of the same challenges that Helen has raised, but also try to overcome them with a variety of, business models, financing partners, and on the ground implementation partners.
Thanks, Jiten. Lisa?
Yeah, I think, so I mean, as investors, we tend to come in, and our main fund is doing debt. So, we tend to come in from the investing standpoint once the company's a little farther along. So they've already proven out one of their products, at least. Where we've assisted through Powering Ag is once the product has been developed, we've helped, support with technical assistance on market analysis, on financing schemes. How can we make this pay as you go? How does this work with the consumer demand? We've also supported through Powering Ag R&D funding to a lesser extent, but pure R&D funding to do pilots on new technologies. So this wouldn't be the first technology that a company's had, but if a company's looking to expand into something else, we supported a pilot of a solar-powered ice maker, for example, which wasn't the company's main product initially, but they're looking to expand. So that's where we've played in. I think Alpha Mundi at its core has a dual mission to reduce poverty and preserve the environment. So we're just inherently screening for those impact metrics initially, and wouldn't work with companies that don't have, one or both of those as an integral part of their business model. But I do think grant funding is important, and subsidies often needed to get some of these companies, ready for the commercial investment. And just coming back to the point that I think it's important, the sooner that you can bring investors into the process, the better, so that the right type of TA can be developed. And then I guess the other thing I would say is, we have, this is outside of powering ag, but, we have seen cases of companies that, have sometimes been so focused on the technology and the product, they haven't done adequate research on the consumer demand and on the market. We saw this specifically with a tech health insurance product, and they spent all this time and had these great partners developing this product, but at the end of the day, they really didn't do enough consumer research, and there was no uptake in the product. So, it's important to have both, and and kind of going hand in hand, and piloting and testing and making sure you know your market. And this is expensive. So grant funding is often critical in these early stages, I think.
Thanks, Lisa. I think that's very interesting. Just one of the things that I wanted to offer from my experience as program manager of Powering Agriculture is that it's not surprising that the first iteration of a product or a technology on the market is expensive, and there's real economies of scale. So as the technologies start to scale up and diffuse, then more players enter the supply chain, is better, more well greased, and there's a consistent demand for the product. The technologies can come down in price. So I think it will be something important for Water and Energy for Food to consider how to reconcile these natural startup costs that shift the market away from the very lowest poorest consumers. And then another point that I think is interesting to consider is that will be interesting to learn under Water and Energy for Food is that energy technologies are inherently, for the ag sector, are inherently somewhat expensive. They're a little different from drought-resistant seeds or a fertilizer product or other inputs that can be distributed in smaller packages. There's sort of a certain minimum cost of entry, and so one of the things that we've noticed under Powering Agriculture is that the companies that are able to introduce something as a service rather than requiring initial upfront cost investment by the farmer might be more successful. So the exception really has been the solar water pumping, but in the case of our cold storage, for instance, Jiten is a great example of a company that's offering something that's more cooling as a service, that the cost can eventually be spread and serve a larger market segment. So I think there's a lot of potential to continue to explore opportunities in this area, and there are very few business models that are really proven out. They're just starting. We're in the early days, so I think that'll be very interesting going forward under Water and Energy for Food. So next question, let me direct back to you again, Lisa. So under Powering Agriculture, we had hoped the goal was to achieve a commercial pathway to scale. Our hypothesis was that if we fund technologies, the way we'll really have the development impact in the end is through commercialization. And you alluded to this a little bit. We certainly thought a necessary precondition of this is bringing in more private capital after the donor funding has come in. So you've alluded to the need to start working together sooner. But I'm wondering, what are the real opportunities you see for donors and investors to work together, and how can we do a better job of complementing one another's efforts?
Yeah, I think I've touched on this a couple times. You know, I think at the very early stage, you know, then you're working, I think, more with, you know, angel and seed investors and in the venture capital type of investors, which I still think is really important. But, you know, in the impact world, I think we're really seeing a proliferation of blended finance instruments. You know, that I could do a whole session on this, but we're seeing more and more of this public-private partnerships and blending finance in a way that supports social enterprises and helps de-risk them, which brings in the private sector capital. So, you know, when you're trying to attract private sector investment and help get these companies to scale, you need to somehow address the risk return equation. So you're either taking risk off the table or you're helping enhance return. And typically what we've seen that works best is on focusing on the risk side. So how can the donors, the public sector, help take some risk off the table that makes it more attractive for private investors to come in? So how the Powering Agriculture Investment Alliance did this was by blending finance with technical assistance. So with Alpha Mundi having the ability to, you know, blend our private investment with technical assistance, we were in essence, you know, de-risking and taking some of that risk off the table that allowed the fund to come in, because we knew, okay, this company, you know, they haven't quite figured out their pay as they go. They might have some trouble scaling, but hey, we can help them with this, and we can also help pay for this too. So that was really important. Looking ahead in the future to other types of instruments, or, you know, I'm not sure where Water and Energy for Food is going, but other ways to do this include things like insurance, things like guarantees. You know, there's a lot of innovative ways that donors can use money to help catalyze in that private sector investment. I don't know if that fully answered the question.
Yes, thanks. That was very interesting. So this next question, I'd like to start out getting the thoughts of Helen and Jiten, and just to make a comment that as soon as we start getting in questions from the audience, I'm happy to defer to your questions and leave mine behind. But until then, I'll ask all my questions. So this question is about this transition from technology development to really growth of a company, and both Promethean and Future Pump have made this transition, and I think experienced some of the challenges around it. But we saw it definitely as a sticking point for some innovators, where it's really easy to get stuck at the technology, from the point of having proven a technology, and not really be able to go to the point of view to the space of growing a company around that technology. And so I would like to get your perspectives on that, how that's worked for your company, and potentially ideas about ways donors in this program could do a better job of supporting that transition. So if we could start with Helen and then Jiten.
I think it's very easy to get trapped in the technology development phase, waiting to make the perfect product, and certainly seen other innovations sort of get stuck in the lab phase. However, it's sort of from Future Pump experience, it's that even if you think it is perfect, it possibly will still get broken in the field, and perhaps it, like Lisa was saying earlier, it might not even fit the market, and you need to have a clear understanding of how that works before it will scale. And it's almost, I would say, you need to find out those kind of things as soon as possible before you get too attached to exactly what the technology that you've developed for 10 years in the lab is, and then you just hope that it scales. So I'd say that perhaps donors should encourage early entrepreneurs to step out of the comfort zone, step out of the lab, or where they are happy and comfortable and know, and really try and get products to customers as soon as possible. So this isn't always easy if you don't have the setup in the field. Perhaps you're not even developing your technology in the country that you are hoping to then get it to the customers. So perhaps there could be increased partnerships with testing hubs in those markets, or with customers who can give that feedback early on, and then you can get that feedback and be able to grow and improve and then scale with that backing of that it's actually a product that people want and can use, and it's fit for purpose. So I would say that that's kind of what we would say, that try to get the innovation with the people who need to use it as soon as possible, and just be willing to adapt and change and learn through that feedback.
Yeah, I think I would echo that, and I think one point Lisa mentioned earlier, and perhaps is explicit here, is we are initially focused on improving the product, but also reaching some level of profitability, and that's usually one of your primary sort of objectives as a company. And when you reach that initial stage of profitability, you have more opportunity to try new products or new markets or new business models, and that's where you can find new opportunities for innovation and reaching segments that are typically underserved. And it's easier sometimes to partner with organizations that have already had operational success and track record. Otherwise, building up the entire operations and demonstration will take a lot of time and be a lot more difficult. For example, we have 3-4 technologies currently in the lab that could be deployed, and it would be easier for a company that's been operating on the ground for several years now and has reached some level of profitability that could use its existing resources to really try to help expand the market and the opportunity for, in our case, refrigeration for smallholder farmers. And I think sometimes there might be a balance between different stages of companies and the types of grants and supports that are available for those companies. And I think the same applies for technical assistance. While we may be a slightly larger or more mature company, there's a lot of value in technical assistance for companies even at a scale such as ours for that next level of sort of growth and penetration in the market. And there might be opportunities for donors and lenders and investors to come together and provide those opportunities for innovators in this program, the Powering Ag program, or others that are in a similar setup, to really take the next level and work together, and then, if successful, have the pipeline of investment ready and available. And perhaps Lisa has some more thoughts on that.
So before we go to the next question, I'd just like to see maybe if Keith could weigh in from the perspective of an external evaluator about this question about what seemed to make the difference for what seemed to help a company transition between the technology development to a more commercialization phase.
Yeah, I think one of the tensions in powering agriculture has been that people have proposed a specific product, and you might want to think for We4Food more about process. Obviously, you don't want to put a bad product out there that will destroy the market, but in most cases, the initial sales are pretty small. And what we found was that in many cases, as has been mentioned, there is too much focus on doing stuff in the lab rather than getting prototypes out quickly that then could be tested and then have a synergy of talking to customers, figuring out what didn't work, what did work. That's really crucial for any company in any technology, is that you really are constantly updating and improving your product. And but a precondition for that is you really need to be manufacturing or developing your product close to your customers, which has been another issue, but something to think about for We4Food.
Thanks, Keith. So we have a question from Dominic. The question is, what kind of technical assistance was most useful for building your business and advancing your product? And what would you have wished to receive more of? And so let's start with Helen and then Jiten, and then Lisa, I'm hoping you could weigh in about the sorts of requests you have gotten from the companies that you work with.
Sure.
Yeah, I think so. We had, through Powering Agriculture, we had several opportunities to receive technical assistance, and certainly just being able to talk through the plans of what we were going to be doing before heading out and actually testing them, and also having that sort of network out there. From a slightly different perspective on technical assistance, I think the ability of the groups of getting together with other innovators was extremely important for me personally, as part of the business, as we're all experiencing new markets and new technologies, and everyone's having new ideas. That was extremely useful. I'm not sure that I can right away think of what other technical assistance we would need more of. I think that will develop as we grow, and actually now leaving the program and looking for external investments and those kind of things would probably then be helpful, but that's going forward into the future. So I think what we received at the time of just going through what the business plan for the business was at the time was helpful. Yeah, I don't know if Jiten, if you want to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think we received quite a bit of technical assistance from the Powering Ag program, and that was instrumental for demonstrating our first sort of products. But I think there's just the opportunity to test the same product with a different set of users. I mean, I think that's one approach that we could take with technical assistance. For example, a different set of either farmers or a different type of geography for us could be an example. I think maybe a mixed approach to certain projects may be a possibility, where if we're trying to prove the use case of the technology, maybe we can try it with 2 or 3 different sets of users simultaneously. So there could be an approach like that part of that could be funded with technical assistance. So for example, we have a small technical assistance program now that's specifically for smallholder farmers for smaller capacity refrigeration units. And initially in the Powering Ag program, we were earlier stage as a company and focused on reaching our initial set of users and as I mentioned, profitability. So the first deployment is going for the customers that are most likely able to pay and help us reach our business objectives. Now we have sort of a different opportunity. So perhaps even back then we could have taken a mixed approach, and there could have been opportunities to do that. So I think for technical assistance in general, my suggestion would be if there's more opportunities for testing products with different markets, I think that would be of significant value.
I agree with what both of you said, certainly on the product testing. I'm going to take a different lens in the finance lens, and I think once you do get to the point where you have a product that works and there's some demand in the market, what we've seen is that you have a lot of companies that start with the technology, they start with the product, they're founded by engineers, and companies need support with the fundraising piece of it, I think, and with that CFO skill set rather. And we see that a lot. I mean, I think of I don't even know, 100, 150 applications we got over the last couple of years. I see so many kind of hockey stick growth charts and, kind of revenue numbers and forecasts, but actually working with the companies so that they understand their cash flow, they understand the different types of financing that are available to them. They understand the different ways that they can capitalize their business and what might make the most sense, given what the company is trying to become. I think that's really helpful. So often at the earlier stages, companies can't afford to hire a CFO, but they often really need a CFO type of person to help with the business models, to help get the data room together, to help with the projections that make sense, to have the conversations with the investors. And, this isn't something you can afford when you're just starting. So, I think that's a really common need that we see both from Powering Ag and across our whole portfolio, and where we've supported a lot, with technical assistance to help get companies to that phase so that they can speak the same language as the investors. So that's been a really common request. Just general working capital is a really common request. And I think R&D was also a pretty common request that we received, although, often the R&D was, it kind of depends how you define it. Whether it was actually more of technical assistance around these types of market studies, or whether it was like specific technology development support. But I guess that's happy to take out other questions there, but we tend to provide, TA a lot on kind of getting the company ready to attract that commercial investment, I would say.
Thanks, Lisa. So we have another question. We have two questions here, and I'm hoping they can be somewhat rolled into one. So from Leo Blight, thanks for your question. You said, given the clear first cost barrier for targeted base of the pyramid end users, what are the panelists' views on the role for either or both demand and supply side smart subsidies and use of donor and/or local government funding, I guess, for those subsidies? And then there was a previous question that was asking about insurance or guarantees at a national level and whether they exist or don't exist. And so I think that's a little bit related, although I might not be entirely understanding that first question. So I think the questions basically around, what do you think about the role for, a larger policy framework and financial supports for the introduction of these technologies? Helen or Jiten, maybe I know we had quite a bit of discussion about this at the policy roundtable that we ran in Nairobi last year, and so I'm wondering maybe if either of you have thoughts initially. Could also talk about the, you could also mention for instance, the impact of the work with CLASP and the bulk procurement incentives and how you've seen that rolling out. A few thoughts.
Yeah, so I would say subsidies and smart subsidies certainly can be a very good thing, as long as they don't distort the market and actually make it extremely difficult to do things following the subsidies. Sometimes one will come in for a year or so, and that is can be extremely challenging when you're actually still trying to make the technology behind it cheaper, but you're then less incentivized to do that, and then the subsidy goes and you've still got the same challenge, and also then the customers think things should be at that cheaper price. So it has to be done in very much the right way, and I think also with knowing clearly, like as the technology manufacturer, knowing when these subsidies are going to be there and when they're not going to be there is actually really important, because there's certainly been one in Uganda for a while that we've been advertising as Future Pump as a discount on the solar pump, and we could actually use that extremely well as a sort of a time limited discount through a marketing and sales sort of sense, but it then gets extended and extended and extended, and then sort of we're wondering, so is that actually now the price of is that always going to be the subsidy in Uganda, or is that going to get pulled in at some point soon, and we just will then have to tackle that as it comes? So I think obviously for the end goal of getting products to end users cheaper, it can be extremely effective, but it has to be communicated correctly and not distort the market. And with the CLASP results-based financing, I think we found the same sort of thing there, that it's sort of, so this was the incentive to have distributors get a discount so that they could get products to end users cheaper. And it felt a little bit rushed, so that there was a big pot of money that then needed to be shared out, and therefore perhaps not managed certainly as the manufacturer, we didn't feel that it was managed in quite the right way, as it stalled some orders that we had, because people weren't ordering quite as often as they might have done. They were just using it to get cheaper products at that point in time, and it didn't quite have enough time to build and get enough traction, I don't think. But I think, so I always think they have this very good ideas behind these things, and they perhaps need to run longer and be communicated better.
I echo a lot of that. You know, I think I'm pretty wary of subsidies at the national level for sure. I think they often distort the market more, like Helen said. You know, we saw it in Rwanda, where the government came in and just started giving away free cook stoves, and then all of a sudden all these companies were, you know, couldn't compete with the free cook stoves. Also, I mean, in the environments we operate, you just never know when the subsidy is going to just disappear. As investors, we get very nervous. You know, we don't like funding any business model where the subsidy is baked into the business model, because it might just completely disappear, and then the business model collapses. You know, certainly with the changes in government, it can as well. So yeah, I think it's tricky. I think things like you know, VAT exemptions or tariff, you know, reductions on imports that would affect the whole sector. You know, the ability to get product into market cheaper. You know, I think that's an idea to explore. I can't say I've done a ton of work on it, but I mean, you know, shipping costs, VAT costs, transport costs, like all of those things, you know, certainly are barriers to really all companies operating, you know, trying to ship product in. So, you know, there, I think exemptions or reductions in tariffs could be something to look at. You know, I don't have as much experience with that, but yeah, I'm pretty wary of the subsidies. I think it's often more market distorting than helpful.
Thanks. I think that was a very interesting question. Unfortunately, I believe we are now out of time. I would have loved to have gotten to Sarah's last question, which looked very interesting, but I think we'll be trying to write some of these up and respond, you know, put some of this on our website so we can get to all of these. So with that, let me just thank the panelists for participating. I thought this was a very interesting and productive discussion. And thank you for your questions and engagement into the end. I really look forward to getting started on water and energy for food and continuing to work with exciting innovators like the ones that have been featured here. So thanks again for joining in. The recording will be made available next week on YouTube and on the website.